The dust from Emma Sullivan's patched skirts settled on the rough-hewn floorboards as she watched another plank fall from the ceiling of the shack, missing little Tommy by mere inches. It was September 1876 in Colfax, California, and the ramshackle structure that served as her schoolhouse looked more likely to collapse than to shelter the 12 children who gathered there each morning, their faces bright with the hunger for learning that their families could never afford to feed properly. Emma had arrived in Colfax 6 months earlier, a 23-year-old woman from Boston with teaching credentials and idealistic dreams that had been thoroughly mocked by the local saloon owner, the general store proprietor, and even the minister's wife. Teaching was meant to be a paid profession, they told her, not charity work for minors' children and ranch hands' daughters who would never amount to anything anyway. But Emma had seen the way those children looked at books, the way their fingers traced letters in the dirt, and she could not turn away. So she found this abandoned prospector's shack on the edge of town, swept out the debris, and hung a sign that reads "School" in careful letters. The roof leaked when it rained. The walls had gaps wide enough to slip a hand through. In winter, the wind howled through those gaps and froze the ink in the inkwells she had purchased with her dwindling savings. The floor was uneven and splintered, and she spent her evenings pulling wood shards from small hands and knees. But the children came and they learned, and that was enough. Or at least it had to be. "Miss Sullivan, is the ceiling going to fall on us?" asked Mary, her voice trembling as she stared at the place where the plank had been. Emma forced brightness into her voice. "Not if we are quick with our lessons today. Now, who can tell me what 7 times 8 equals?" She had just finished writing the multiplication tables on the battered slate board when the door swung open, bringing with it a gust of California heat and the silhouette of a man who had to duck to enter. Nathan Irving stood in the doorway, hat in his hands, his dark eyes taking in the scene with an expression Emma could not quite read. She knew him by reputation. Everyone in Colfax did. He was a cowboy who had made good, running a successful cattle operation in the foothills and employing half the ranch hands in the county. He was 26, unmarried and generally kept to himself except when business brought him to town. "Miss Sullivan," he said, his voice low and respectful. "Pardon the interruption." Emma felt her cheeks warm under the scrutiny of those eyes. She was suddenly aware of how she must look, her brown hair escaping its pins, her dress worn and dusty, her hands stained with chalk. "Mr. Irving, how can I help you?" Nathan's gaze moved from her face to the ceiling, to the gaps in the walls, to the children sitting on logs and overturned crates because there were no proper benches. Something shifted in his expression, a tightening around his mouth. "I came to town to buy supplies and heard from the postmaster that you were teaching here. I wanted to see it for myself." "Well, now you have seen it," Emma said, lifting her chin. She had endured enough judgment from the townspeople. She did not need it from him too. "If you will excuse us, we are in the middle of arithmetic." But Nathan did not leave. He walked slowly around the perimeter of the room, testing the walls with his hand, examining the supports, crouching to look at the foundation. The children watched him with wide eyes. Emma felt her irritation growing with each step he took. "Mr. Irving, I must insist that you either sit and observe quietly or leave us to our lessons." He straightened, turning to face her fully. "This building is not safe, Miss Sullivan. It could come down in the next strong wind." "I am aware of the building's limitations," Emma said stiffly, "but it is what we have and we make do. Why do you not charge for teaching? The parents could pay something, surely." Emma's hands clenched at her sides. "Because most of these families can barely afford food. Because the parents work dawn to dusk in the mines or on the ranches. because education should not be a luxury only the wealthy can afford. Something in Nathan's face softened. He nodded slowly, as if she had confirmed something he suspected. "How long have you been doing this?" "6 months. And you have been paying for everything yourself? Books, slates, chalk. That is none of your concern, Mr. Irving." He looked at her for a long moment, then settled his hat back on his head. "Good day, Miss Sullivan. Children." He nodded to the class and left, pulling the door shut carefully behind him. Emma released a breath she had not realized she was holding. The children erupted into whispers and giggles, fascinated by the interruption. She clapped her hands twice. "Attention, please. Now, where were we?" But her mind kept drifting back to the cowboy's face, to the way he had looked at the children, to the strange intensity in his eyes when she explained why she taught for free. That evening, as Emma walked back to the boarding house where she rented a tiny room, she noticed Nathan Irving's horse tied outside the general store. She quickened her pace, not wanting another encounter, but his voice called out behind her. "Miss Sullivan, wait." She stopped, turning reluctantly. He caught up to her in a few long strides, and she was struck again by how tall he was, how solid. His face was weathered from years outdoors, with lines at the corners of his eyes that suggested he smiled more than his serious demeanor indicated. "I want to help," he said without preamble. Emma blinked. "I beg your pardon, your school. I want to help. That shack is a death trap. Let me build you a proper schoolhouse." For a moment, Emma could only stare at him. Then she found her voice. "Mr. Irving, I cannot accept charity." "It would not be charity. Those children need a safe place to learn. You need a safe place to teach. I have the means to provide it, and it seems foolish not to." He shifted his weight, and she realized he was nervous. "I can start next week. I have men who can help. We can have a building up in a month, maybe less." "Why?" Emma asked. "Why would you do this?" Nathan looked away toward the darkening hills beyond the town. "My mother taught me to read," he said quietly. "She was the only person in our family who could. She taught me by candlelight after working all day as a laundress. She died when I was 12, and I have never forgotten what she gave me. Every opportunity I have had came from being able to read, to cipher, to write contracts and keep accounts." He looked back at her. "Those children in your shack deserve the same chance I got, and you deserve better than risking your life in a building that could collapse at any moment." Emma felt something shift in her chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the evening heat. "I do not know what to say." "Say yes," Nathan said simply. She studied his face, searching for any sign of mockery or ulterior motive, but found only sincerity. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, thank you." The smile that broke across his face transformed it entirely, and Emma felt her heart do something strange and fluttering. The next week, Nathan arrived with 4 of his ranch hands and a wagon full of lumber. Emma had secured permission from the town council to use a plot of land near the church, a level space with good drainage and a large oak tree for shade. She stood to the side with the children, who had been dismissed early so they could watch the beginning of construction. Nathan had drawn up plans, proper architectural drawings that he spread out on a makeshift table. He showed her where the door would be, where the windows would let in light, where the stove would sit for winter heating. There would be a small room at the back for supplies and for Emma to use as an office. The roof would be properly shingled, the walls tight and insulated. "It is too much," Emma said, overwhelmed. "It is exactly right," Nathan replied. She watched him work over the following weeks, fascinated despite herself. He moved with easy competence, measuring and sawing, directing his men with quiet authority. His shirts grew dark with sweat in the California sun, and Emma found her eyes drawn to the strength in his shoulders, the sureness of his hands. She brought water and sandwiches at midday, using the children's lunch break as an excuse to visit the construction site. Nathan always stopped to talk with her during those visits. At first, their conversations were about the school, about measurements and timber and paint colors. But gradually, they began to talk about other things. He told her about his ranch, about the cattle drives and the challenges of managing land in drought years. She told him about Boston, about her family who had been horrified when she announced her intention to travel west and teach. "They wanted you to marry well and settle down," Nathan guessed one afternoon, accepting a tin cup of water from her hands. "They wanted me to marry at all," Emma said with a rueful smile. "I am considered quite the spinster at 23. That seems young for spinsterhood." "Not in Boston society. Most of my classmates were married by 20. Nathan took a long drink, his eyes on her over the rim of the cup. "Why were you not?" Emma felt her cheeks warm. "Because I wanted more than tea parties and calling cards. I wanted to do something that mattered. My parents thought I was being foolish and stubborn." "I think you are being brave," Nathan said quietly. Their eyes met and held. Emma felt that flutter in her chest again, stronger this time. She cleared her throat. "The children are waiting for their afternoon lessons." "Of course." But he smiled as she turned away, and she could feel that smile warming her back all the way to the old shack. The schoolhouse took shape through October and into early November. Emma continued teaching in the falling-down shack. But now the children talked constantly about the new building, their excitement growing with each wall that went up, each window frame that was installed. Emma shared their excitement, but she also felt something else, something she was almost afraid to name. She was falling in love with Nathan Irving. It was there in the way her heart lifted when she saw his horse tied outside the general store. It was there in the way she found excuses to visit the construction site, in the way she listened for his voice among the sounds of hammering and sawing. It was there in the way she caught herself watching his hands as he worked, imagining what they might feel like touching her face, her hair. She tried to be sensible about it. Nathan was helping because he was a good man with a generous heart, not because he had any particular interest in her. He was kind to everyone, respectful and courteous. The fact that he sometimes looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch meant nothing. The fact that he always seemed to find reasons to draw out their midday conversations meant nothing, except it did mean something, and she knew it. One evening in mid-November, Emma was locking up the old shack when she realized she had left her lesson plans at the construction site. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and she hurried to the new schoolhouse, hoping her papers had not blown away. She found Nathan there alone, his men already gone for the day. He was inside the nearly completed building, running his hand along the windowsill, checking the smoothness of the wood. He looked up when she entered, surprise crossing his face. "Emma," he said, and her name in his voice made her shiver. "Is something wrong? I left some papers here earlier. I did not mean to disturb you. You are not disturbing me." He watched as she found her papers on the small desk he had already installed in the teacher's office. "I was just admiring the work. We will be finished in another week." Emma looked around at the solid walls, the level floor, the windows that would let in so much beautiful light. "Nathan, I do not know how to thank you for this. It is beyond anything I dreamed possible." He moved closer to her, and in the dimming light his eyes were very dark. "Do you know why I keep coming here every day? Why I have been working on this building myself instead of just hiring men to do it?" Emma's mouth went dry. "Because you want it done right. Because every moment I spend here is a moment I might see you." His voice was rough, honest. "Because I have not been able to stop thinking about you since the day I walked into that death-trap shack and saw you standing there, covered in dust and chalk, fighting to give those children a future. Because you are the bravest, most stubborn, most beautiful woman I have ever met. Emma's papers slipped from her fingers, scattering on the new floor. Nathan, I know I have no right, he continued. I am just a rancher and you are educated, refined. You come from a world I could never fit into, but I am asking anyway. May I court you, Emma, properly, with respect, with the intention of marriage if you will have me? She stared at him, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. You think you are not good enough for me? I know the difference in our stations. Emma laughed, a sound caught between joy and disbelief. Nathan, I live in a boarding house and teach in a shack that is literally falling down. I spend my days covered in chalk dust and my evenings mending the same 3 dresses over and over. You built me a schoolhouse. You saw what I was trying to do and you helped me do it better. You speak of stations as if they matter, but what matters is this. She pressed her hand to her chest. What matters is that I have been falling in love with you for weeks, and I have been too afraid to admit it because I thought you only saw me as a charity case. Nathan closed the distance between them in 2 strides. His hands came up to cup her face, his palms rough and warm against her skin. Never a charity case, an inspiration, a revelation, a dream I did not know I was allowed to have. When he kissed her, it was gentle at first, almost tentative, as if he was afraid she might disappear. But Emma rose on her toes and wrapped her arms around his neck, kissing him back with all the feeling she had been holding inside, and his arms came around her, strong and sure, pulling her close against his chest. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. Is that a yes to courting? That is a yes to everything, Emma whispered. The schoolhouse was completed the week before Thanksgiving. Nathan and his men spent the last few days painting the exterior a cheerful yellow with white trim, and Nathan himself carved and painted the sign that hung above the door, Colfax School. But there was another surprise Emma did not know about until Nathan arrived on the morning of the grand opening with 3 more wagons. What is all this? Emma asked, watching as his men began unloading furniture. I told you I would furnish every room, Nathan said, grinning at her surprise. Did you think I meant just the building? Over the next 2 hours, Emma watched in stunned delight as the schoolhouse was transformed. Proper desks with attached benches were carried in and arranged in neat rows. A large teacher's desk of polished oak was placed at the front. Bookshelves were installed along one wall, and Nathan had purchased books to fill them, primers and readers, and even a few precious volumes of poetry and history. There were slates for every child, boxes of chalk, ink and pens, maps to hang on the walls. In the back room there were supplies for art and nature study, a globe, even a small piano. Nathan, this is too much, Emma said, tears streaming down her face. This must have cost a fortune. What good is a fortune if you cannot spend it on something worthwhile? He pulled her into his arms, not caring that his men could see. You are worthwhile, Emma. Those children are worthwhile. This is the best investment I will ever make. The opening of the school was celebrated by the whole town. Parents who had been skeptical of Emma's charity teaching now lined up to shake her hand and thank her. The children ran through the new building with shrieks of joy, marveling at the desks and books and the stove that would keep them warm all winter. The minister gave a blessing. The town council gave speeches. And through it all, Nathan stood at Emma's side, his hand occasionally brushing hers, his eyes warm with pride. That evening, after the crowds had dispersed and the children had gone home, Emma and Nathan sat on the steps of the schoolhouse and watched the sunset. I never imagined anything like this, Emma said softly. When I came to Colfax, I thought I would teach in that shack until it finally collapsed, or until I ran out of money and had to go home in defeat." "I am glad you did not give up," Nathan said. "And I am glad I walked through that door when I did. So am I." She leaned her head on his shoulder, and he put his arm around her. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sky turn from gold to purple to deep blue. "Emma," Nathan said finally, "I know we have only been courting for a few weeks. I know this is fast. But I am not a man who wastes time or hides his feelings. I love you. I want to marry you. I want to build a life with you here in Colfax, with this school and these children and whatever future we can make together." Emma lifted her head to look at him. In the twilight, his face was serious, almost solemn. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes. Yes, I will marry you. Yes, I love you. Yes to all of it." Nathan's face broke into a smile that rivaled the sunset for brilliance. He stood, pulling her to her feet, and kissed her so thoroughly that she forgot to breathe. When they finally parted, he kept his hands on her waist, his eyes searching hers. "I will do everything in my power to make you happy," he promised. "You already have," Emma said. They were married in the new schoolhouse on a cold December morning, with the children as witnesses and half the town in attendance. Emma wore a simple dress of ivory silk that Nathan had ordered from San Francisco, and she carried wildflowers that his ranch hands had somehow managed to find blooming in a sheltered canyon. Nathan wore his best suit and looked so handsome that Emma's breath caught when she saw him waiting at the front of the room. The ceremony was brief, but heartfelt. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, the children cheered so loudly that Emma laughed through her tears. Nathan kissed her gently, sweetly, and then swept her into his arms and carried her down the aisle while the entire assembly clapped and whistled. The wedding breakfast was held at the largest restaurant in Colfax, and Nathan had arranged for every detail. There was music and dancing, and Emma waltzed with her new husband while their friends and neighbors celebrated around them. "Happy, Mrs. Irving," Nathan murmured in her ear as they swayed to the music. "Happier than I have ever been," Emma replied. Nathan had built a house for them on his ranch, a beautiful 2-story structure with a wide porch and views of the rolling hills. He carried Emma over the threshold that evening, and she gasped at what she saw. He had furnished every room with the same care he had shown the schoolhouse. There was a large sitting room with comfortable chairs and shelves for books. There was a dining room with a table big enough for a large family. There was a kitchen with a modern stove and every convenience. And upstairs, there was a bedroom with a massive bed covered in quilts and windows that looked out on the starlit sky. "You like it?" Nathan asked, setting her down gently. Emma turned in a slow circle, taking it all in. "I love it. Nathan, you have given me so much. The school, this house, your love. I feel like I should have more to give you in return." He pulled her close, his hands warm on her back. "You give me everything just by being here, by being yourself, by loving me back." That night they lay together in their new bed, wrapped in each other's arms, and Emma felt a peace and contentment she had never known. This was home. This was love. This was the life she had dreamed of without knowing she was dreaming. The winter passed in a blur of happiness. Emma taught at the school during the day, and Nathan managed his ranch. They came together every evening, sharing meals and conversation and the deep, abiding love that grew stronger with each passing week. Emma got to know the rhythms of ranch life, the early mornings and the hard work, the satisfaction of seeing cattle thrive and land well tended. Nathan learned the challenges of teaching, the patience required, and the joy of watching children learn. They visited the school together on weekends, and Nathan began teaching some of the older boys about animal husbandry and ranch management. In the spring, Emma discovered she was pregnant. She told Nathan one evening in April as they sat on their porch watching the sunset. He went very still for a moment, then let out a whoop of joy that probably carried all the way to town. He picked her up and spun her around until she was dizzy and laughing, begging him to put her down. "We are going to have a baby," he kept saying, wonder in his voice. "We are going to be parents." "Yes," Emma said, her hands on his face, her eyes shining. "We are." Nathan became even more protective than usual, fretting over her health and insisting she rest more. Emma continued teaching through the summer, but when the school year ended in June, she decided to take some time off to prepare for the baby. She found a young woman from Sacramento who needed work, and with Nathan's financial support, they hired her as an assistant teacher for the next school year. Their son was born in November of 1877, during the first snowfall of the season. The birth was long and difficult, and there were moments when Nathan feared he might lose Emma. But she was as strong and stubborn in labor as she was in everything else, and when the midwife finally placed the squalling infant in her arms, Emma looked up at Nathan with such radiant joy that he fell in love with her all over again. They named him Michael, after Nathan's father. He had his mother's brown eyes and his father's dark hair, and from the first moment, Nathan was utterly besotted. Emma would wake in the middle of the night to feed the baby and find Nathan already awake, just watching their son sleep with an expression of awe on his face. "I never knew I could feel like this," he confessed one night. "Like my heart is walking around outside my body." Emma understood completely. She had never imagined the fierce, consuming love she felt for this tiny person. And watching Nathan with their son, seeing his gentleness and patience, made her love her husband even more deeply. The spring after Michael was born, Emma returned to teaching part-time, bringing the baby with her and setting up a cradle in her office. The children were enchanted with the infant, and the older girls especially loved helping care for him during lessons. Nathan often rode into town during the day to check on them, unable to stay away from his little family for long. Life settled into a beautiful rhythm. The school thrived, with enrollment growing every year. Nathan's ranch prospered, and he began buying additional land. Emma and Nathan's love deepened and matured, weathering the small storms that all marriages face and emerging stronger each time. They made love with passion and tenderness. They argued occasionally and always made up. They worked together and dreamed together and built a life that was richer than either had imagined possible. When Michael was 2, Emma discovered she was pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, and in the spring of 1880 she gave birth to a daughter. They named her Rose, and she had her father's serious eyes and her mother's bright smile. Nathan held his daughter with the same wonder he had shown his son, and Emma's heart swelled watching her strong cowboy husband coo and cuddle the tiny girl. The children visited often, sometimes bringing homework questions, but just as often coming to play with Michael and see the baby. Emma's school had become the heart of the community, a place where children not only learned reading and arithmetic, but also kindness and hope. Parents who had once dismissed education as frivolous now saved money to buy their children books. Older students who had finished their schooling came back to help teach the younger ones. The schoolhouse Nathan had built was no longer just a building. It was a symbol of what was possible when someone cared enough to try. In the summer of 1881, the town of Colfax decided to establish a proper school district with a paid teacher's salary funded by local taxes. They offered the position to Emma unanimously. She accepted, moved to tears that the work she had started as charity was now recognized as valuable and essential. Nathan celebrated by building an addition onto the schoolhouse, adding 2 more classrooms to accommodate the growing number of students. One evening that fall, Emma and Nathan sat on their porch as they had so many times before. Michael was chasing fireflies in the yard, and Rose was asleep in Emma's arms. The air was cool and smelled of hay and wood smoke. "You ever think about Boston?" Nathan asked. "Do you ever regret leaving?" Emma looked at him in surprise. "Never. Not for a single moment. Why do you ask?" "Because sometimes I worry that this life is too hard, too simple, that you gave up too much to be here." Emma shifted Rose to one arm and reached for Nathan's hand with the other. "I gave up nothing that mattered and gained everything that does. Nathan, before I came here, I was drifting. I had education and social standing but no purpose. I had family but no home. And then I came to Colfax, and I found my calling in that falling-down shack. And then I found you." She squeezed his hand. "You saw me teaching in that terrible building, and instead of telling me I was foolish, you built me a schoolhouse. You furnished every room. You gave me the tools to change lives. And then you gave me your heart, your name, your children. You gave me this life." "How could I ever regret that?" Nathan pulled her close, careful not to wake the sleeping baby. "I love you, Emma Irving. I loved you the first day I saw you, covered in chalk dust and determined to save the world one child at a time." "I love you too," Emma whispered. "My cowboy, my partner. My home." They sat together in the gathering darkness, their son playing nearby, their daughter sleeping peacefully, their hands entwined. The schoolhouse stood in the distance, its yellow paint glowing in the last light of day, a testament to love and hope and the power of one person who cared and another who saw that caring and built something beautiful around it. Years passed, each one bringing new joys and challenges. Michael grew into a thoughtful boy who loved books and horses in equal measure. Rose became a spirited little girl who followed her brother everywhere and already showed signs of having her mother's teaching gift. In 1883, Emma gave birth to twin boys, Samuel and Daniel, who kept the household in cheerful chaos. And in 1885, another daughter arrived, Lucy, who had her father's calm temperament and her mother's stubborn streak. The Irving house was always full of noise and love, of children's laughter and the smell of Emma's cooking, of Nathan's voice reading stories by the fire and Emma's singing as she worked. Ranch hands became like family, often staying for dinner and playing with the children. Students from the school visited regularly, even those who had long since graduated and started families of their own. Emma continued teaching until 1886, when the demands of raising 5 children finally convinced her to step back. She trained a new teacher, a young woman who reminded Emma of herself years earlier, full of idealism and determination. But Emma never truly left the school. She visited regularly, helped with difficult students, organized community events, and remained on the school board for the rest of her life. Nathan's ranch became one of the most successful in the region, not just because of his skill with cattle and land management, but because he was known as a fair employer who paid well and treated his workers with respect. Many of his ranch hands were former students from Emma's school, young men who had learned to read and cipher under her patient instruction, and then learned ranching from Nathan's equally patient teaching. In 1890, on a warm September evening very much like the one when they had first confessed their love, Emma and Nathan sat on the porch of their home and watched their children play in the yard. Michael was 17 now, tall and strong like his father, preparing to attend university in San Francisco. Rose was 15, already helping teach at the school and talking about becoming a teacher herself. The twins were 10, wild and adventurous, and keeping their parents constantly on their toes. And Lucy was 5, the baby of the family, sweet and clever and utterly adored by her older siblings. "We have done well," Nathan said quietly, his arm around Emma's shoulders. "We have done better than well," Emma replied. "We have built something that will last long after we are gone. Look at our children. Look at that schoolhouse. Look at this community. We have made a difference, Nathan." He turned to look at her, and his eyes held the same love and wonder they had held on their wedding day, on the day each of their children was born, on every ordinary day in between. "You made the difference, Emma. You were the one who started teaching in that shack. I just helped you do it better." "No," Emma said firmly. "We did it together. You saw what I was trying to do and you made it possible. You built the schoolhouse. You furnished every room. You gave me the foundation I needed to make a real change. And then you gave me this." She gestured to their home, their children, the life they had built together. "We are partners, Nathan, in everything." He kissed her then, soft and sweet, a kiss that spoke of 14 years of marriage and a lifetime of love still to come. When they parted, Emma rested her head on his shoulder, and they watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Michael came up onto the porch, followed by his siblings. "Mama, Papa, we were wondering if we could ride out to the east pasture tomorrow. Daniel thinks he saw a golden eagle nesting there." Nathan looked at Emma, who nodded. "That sounds like a fine adventure," he said. "We will all go make a day of it. Your mother can bring one of her excellent picnic lunches." The children cheered and scattered back into the yard, already planning their expedition. Emma smiled, watching them go. "I wonder what they will make of their lives, what kind of people they will become." "They will be good people," Nathan said with certainty. "How could they be anything else with you as their mother?" "And you as their father," Emma countered. "You have shown them what it means to be strong and gentle, to work hard and care deeply, to see a need and meet it without being asked." "We have shown them together," Nathan said. "Just as we have done everything together." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Emma thought back to that morning in the falling down shack, to the moment when a tall cowboy had walked through the door and changed her life forever. She thought about the schoolhouse he had built with his own hands, about the way he had furnished every room with such care, about the home he had made for her, and the family they had created together. She had come to Colfax with nothing but hope and determination, teaching children in a shack that was literally collapsing around her. And Nathan had seen her, truly seen her, and had built her something solid and lasting. But more than that, he had built them a life together, a love that had weathered every storm and emerged stronger, a family that would carry their legacy forward long after they were gone. "What are you thinking about?" Nathan asked softly. "I am thinking that I am the luckiest woman in the world," Emma said. "I am thinking that 14 years ago you walked into a falling down shack and saw me covered in dust and struggling to teach, and instead of seeing someone to pity, you saw someone to love." "I saw someone extraordinary," Nathan said. "I saw the woman I had been waiting for my entire life, and I thank God every day that I had the courage to build you that schoolhouse, because it gave me a reason to see you every day until you finally fell in love with me too." Emma laughed. "I fell in love with you almost immediately. I just did not want to admit it." "I know," Nathan said, grinning. "I could see it in your eyes every time you brought water to the construction site. You would try to look stern and disapproving, but your eyes gave you away." "Insufferable man," Emma said affectionately, poking him in the ribs. "You could have said something sooner. I was trying to be respectable, to court you properly. Well, you did a thorough job of it. You courted me, married me, gave me 5 beautiful children, and built me a life beyond anything I could have imagined." Emma turned to look at him seriously. "Nathan, I need you to know something. I need you to know that you are the best thing that ever happened to me. That every day with you is a gift, that I would choose this life, this love, 1,000 times over." Nathan's eyes were suspiciously bright in the starlight. "Emma, my love, my heart, you have made me happier than I ever dreamed possible. You have given me purpose and joy and a family I cherish more than my own life. I built you a schoolhouse, but you built me a home. You built us a future, and I will spend every remaining day of my life thanking you for it." They kissed again, deeper this time, with the passion and promise that had not dimmed in 14 years of marriage. The children's voices drifted up from the yard, laughing and arguing and being beautifully, perfectly alive. The schoolhouse stood in the distance, its windows dark now but ready to welcome students again in the morning. The ranch stretched out around them, prosperous and well-tended. And above them, the stars wheeled slowly across the California sky, eternal and unchanging, watching over two people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful from nothing but love and determination. Emma and Nathan sat on their porch long into the night, talking and dreaming as they had always done, as they would continue to do for all the years to come. They spoke of their children's futures, of improvements to the school, of the cattle drive planned for next spring. They spoke of small things and large things, of the ordinary and the extraordinary, bound together by love and partnership, and the deep, abiding knowledge that they had found in each other exactly what they had been searching for all along. When they finally rose to go inside, Nathan took Emma's hand and raised it to his lips. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" "For coming to Colfax, for teaching in that terrible shack, for letting me build you a schoolhouse, for falling in love with me, for giving me this life." Emma smiled, standing on her toes to kiss him one more time. "Thank you for seeing me, for believing in me, for building me a schoolhouse and furnishing every room, for loving me exactly as I am, for giving me everything I never knew I needed." They walked inside together, hand in hand, their children's voices calling them to settle some minor dispute. The door closed behind them, shutting out the night, enclosing them in warmth and light and love. Outside, the schoolhouse stood silent and strong, a monument to what one woman's determination and one man's generosity could create together. And in the house on the hill, the Irving family lived and loved and grew, their story becoming part of the fabric of Colfax, a testament to the enduring power of love and the miracle that happens when two people see each other truly and choose to build a life together, one room, one child, one day at a time, until they have created something that will last forever.